If your websites conduct transactions or collect sensitive data, you have a material risk on your hands that could cost millions. The client-side security gap is being exploited daily with attacks like digital skimming, credential harvesting, and form jacking. 98% of sites use first and third-party JavaScript to power and enhance the user experience, opening up the client side to the adversary. Unlike most things in security, there is an easy fix. Start by understanding your risk. Let Source Defense give you a site-wide risk report this week. Visit securityweekly.com/source defense. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. If you have a specific guest or topic you'd like us to cover on one of the upcoming shows, submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests. We review those on a regular basis, and we will get back to you. Joining us, first we added a host. Mr. Lee Neely is here with us. Lee, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, good to be here. And just in case you missed it, did you hear about the folks fired from the calendar factory? It seemed they tried to take a few days off.
Love that one.
Probably February 29th, 30th, and 31st.
That's right.
Yeah. Well.
Joining us for this segment, Hanine Salem from the Novus Consulting Group. Hanine has over 20 years of executive-level experience in education and human capital development. Joins us tonight to discuss an alarming increase in K-12 cybersecurity attacks, how districts are considering new ways to protect their students and staff, and how we build the next generation of cybersecurity experts. Hanine, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul, so much. It's great to be here.
It's nice to have you, Hanine. How did you get, I guess we usually ask how you get started in cybersecurity, but what turns you on to address some of these issues specifically in cybersecurity?
So my background is in education and human capital development, youth development. So I have worked in that space for decades now. And we've known for years that there's something missing. It's education and learning should be more than subject, should be more than teaching math and English and science and history and social studies, all important topics. And so for years now, we've identified some gaps, especially related to competencies and skills that students are not necessarily getting equipped in. And so cybersecurity definitely was at the top of that list, among many other skills and competencies that we identified, like I said, from our work on the ground, from our research, from our projects. There's an urgent need to address those gaps. Now, we've arrived at that conclusion way ahead of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. I would say at least few years before the pandemic started. And we started thinking of ways to reach out and start creating awareness. And that's when the idea of putting together an online course, an accredited online course, started to crystallize in our minds and then turn from an idea to an actual course.
Now,
and so
Hanine,
this is kind of in a nutshell why we're here.
I'm curious, when do we start? This is like a somewhat controversial topic, right, that we get into debates. Like, when do we start not just teaching cybersecurity, but all types of engineering? Do we start in grade school? Do we start? I mean, you said K through 12, right? Is in your bio. How early do we start, and how do we adapt and change that program as students progress, all the way through high school and beyond?
Right. So my take on that is that the earlier you start, the better, right? I mean, in education, any content should be adapted and to address the specific age group that we are targeting. And so, for example, in our course, we brought in educational specialists who specialize in the age group that we were targeting. And the reason we started with high schoolers is that because we think this is such an urgent, immediate need, especially for students as they transition to colleges and then to the workplace. Mm-hmm. Let's give them this dose of information and knowledge before they transition. But certainly it is our intention and our plan, and I can tell you that this is our next move for sure, is to start producing content and courses for younger people, and you can start as early as possible. Just make sure the content, the topic, is engaging for the specific age group that you're targeting.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard to teach the concept of passwords to kindergartners who are still learning their letters, right? That doesn't mean they can't learn other fundamentals about cybersecurity, but I like the fact that you bring in educators that are specializing in this to adapt this learning and training to the right age group.
Right. And as you know, I mean, every age group has a certain attention span, right? Interest and language that you need to keep in mind when you put together content like that and present it. And so, and I tell you, even in kindergarten, I mean, there's a lot of information around this topic that can be conveyed for kids as young as those in kindergarten.
Yeah, my youngest son is in kindergarten, so I know exactly. I mean, I have those conversations with him, as often as I can. Yeah, it's interesting to think about starting that early. Well,
you mentioned you had a certified course. What was that all about? What was that like to get it certified?
Well, it was a long and I wouldn't say painful, but it was a long process, and we got it accredited. Our first accreditation right now that we have is through an educational organization actually in the UK called City and Guilds. And we got it also accredited from the Institute of Learning and Management, also in the UK. And they, it's not easy to get that accreditation. They had a lot of questions, they looked through every word. They bring in a lot of specialists and experts, but we thought it's good and it's important for a course like that to have that accreditation associated with it. And then the idea also, especially because initially we are targeting high schoolers, so we wanted them to have something that they can put on their resumes, right? And it helps a lot, we think, to have an accredited course as they put together resumes, whether for colleges or for jobs. And that's the idea behind seeking accreditation. We're talking with a number of top universities actually in the US right now, and hoping to also, it looks very good and very promising, to get their endorsement of the course.
How long a course is it? I mean, is this something that's taught in a semester, an hour a day, or is this something that's, like a concentrated week? I mean, what's your delivery?
So it's the course has 9 modules. And it depends on the student. A student can take the course online, on their phones, on their laptops, and it's a gated course. So you cannot move to module number 2 until you finish module 1 and you answer the test that is at the end of that module or chapter, if you would, successfully. And then you move on to module 2, module 3. And so I would say on average, a student can finish it within a week. The modes of delivery are so flexible. So, a student his or her parents can sign them up for the course, and a school district can get the course and just offer it to their students. A school system or an individual school can do that. And it's very flexible in that we agree with the clients on how long they want to allow their students to finish the course, right? Yeah, so they might say, we want to give them a year or a week or 2 weeks or a month. So that's also very flexible, and it depends on what a school or what a school district wants.
But so important that for high schoolers, it's on their phone if they want, because we know high schoolers, they can't put their phones down. That's their main method of accessing everything, communicating with each other, and also carries with it. I know at least a few of us, we have kids going into high school. Larry and I definitely do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I mean, their phone is everything, right? But protecting that phone is also important. As I was telling Hanine earlier, like, our children have the benefit of there being a hacker and cybersecurity expert, like, in the house and where their parents, but not everyone has that, right? And we've brought them up with dad or mom is a hacker, right? And so they absorb that knowledge kind of organically. And we want to see that for all children, right? And I think your course is definitely one way to help accomplish this goal.
Right, absolutely, exactly. And we really think that the dose of information included in the course is sufficient to a large extent, at least to create that level of awareness where these young people can protect themselves, their homes, their schools, their future employers, their future colleges, what have you. And we, maybe it's interesting to add that that's why we called it cyber citizenship, because there's an element of accountability and responsibility that we would like to be associated with that knowledge.
Yeah.
So you really
agree.
Trying to create.
Because I go through this, like, not just with my child, but, their friends, my nieces and nephews, that it's not just protecting their devices and information from being hacked. It's about being, what you said, Hanine, a good net citizen, right? And that means, in my son's case, I'm like, knock it off with the eggplant emojis. Like, your friends might think that's funny to a certain extent, like, but because it's not a face-to-face interaction, they tend to take certain liberties, and I try and nip that in the bud with as many of the youth as I can find, to be like, no, like, you're still having a conversation. Like, the rules of society apply to your digital personas just as they do if you're sitting in a classroom and talking to your students and the teacher and your principal, right? And also dad is watching.
I'm going to point out, Paul, that considering we're on this podcast, I'm just going to say it, your kid's being a dick.
Yes. I mean, that's where I think training such as this, right, that extends beyond parents who are like us, who are knowledgeable in cybersecurity and have been around the internet for a long time and have seen these kind of interactions, right, can help because everyone needs this lesson.
I got a question, Paul.
Yeah, go ahead.
So how do we get this class to our students from our educators when, in my experience in some of the schools, there is a clear technology understanding gap? I think about our elementary school, and that, with the shift to some of the digital learning and so forth last year, pretty darn quick, and then having those same capabilities available for the beginning of this school year and so forth. And there's clearly a gap when we're now going to be teaching kids K through 6 in my case about cybersecurity. Yet the school can't practice the same things that we're teaching them about. I think every student had their email created first initial last name with a password with no uppercase and no numbers and a very guessable password. Like, how do we?
And it was only 6 characters long.
7 in my case, but Larry's spot on. Not
7,
just in his school
7.
district, my school district as well.
But how do we bridge that technology and that understanding gap?
Well, that's a great question. And we were talking about this earlier, the importance of approaching this in a comprehensive, holistic way. I mean, I would add to that there's also an issue and challenge related to the preparedness of teachers and principals and school leaders, and the level of knowledge that they have regarding the topic. So in addition to the technical side, there's a lot of capacity building to be built. And that's part of what we are working on, creating that awareness that it's not a matter of transferring this knowledge from this course to the minds of the kids so that they're aware and they are careful and etc. It's this entire ecosystem that I think schools need to work on and be aware of the shortages and challenges associated with. So there's the technical side that you mentioned. There's the computers that they have, the instructions that they have, but there's also a knowledge component related to what teachers know about the subject, and a teacher should be a few steps at least ahead of the student, right, in any topic that they are teaching. And so putting together something to build capacity at the teachers and educators level and school administrators and principals level, as well as parents, by the way, is very much on our mind. And we're hoping to address that with similar courses, attempts, awareness campaigns, what have you.
Hanine, how technical is the course? Like, how does it balance that, awareness training with a technical kind of aspect?
So the course, Paul, it's not purely technical, right? It covers, issues about hackers, malware, social engineering, vulnerabilities, talking about passwords and what have you. It talks about social media, cyber hygiene, everyday internet, all of these issues. And so this particular track, think about it as course 101. So right now we're having conversations. There are governments actually that are interested in developing phase 2 or phase 3 of a product like that or a course like that, whereby you initially give this dose of information, make sure that the student, the recipient, is aware of all the aspects related to the topic. And by the way, the course is continuously updated to make sure it reflects the latest in the field, and there are cybersecurity experts who will contribute to making sure it's up to date. But then again, the idea of moving into a much more technical course is probably going to be in the second and or third version.
Yeah, and I like that approach, Hanine, because my wife works in the healthcare field, and she told me, actually not that long ago, right? We'd been married for a really long time. She's like, anyone that goes into healthcare, especially in like a technical field, nursing, medical imaging, has to take a course that familiarizes themselves with all the medical terminology. And what you described about the course you built was, if you're in mixed company, like in your neighborhood, just as an example, and you're using terms like social engineering, malware, vulnerabilities, multi-factor authentication, people's eyes glaze over and they're like, what are you talking? One of my neighbors is in cybersecurity, and we'll be conversing and they're like, we have no idea what you're talking about. I'm like, we weren't even talking about anything technical. And your course is addressing this specific topic, which I think is very important.
Right, exactly. And I want to add to that, probably another objective. This was not necessarily an objective of the course at the very beginning, but we started paying attention to it later on during the development of the product and the course, and also upon this further discussions with different educators. We're hoping to ignite interest. We're hoping this course, which is quite comprehensive and it covers all the basics and a bit more, I would say. We're hoping that some of the recipients are going to go, oh, okay, a light bulb will go on and say, I'm so interested in this. I want to explore a career in cyber security. I'm sorry. I would like to work in this field. This is something of interest to me. I didn't know that these challenges exist, and there are actually people who are working to solve them. And so there's that expected outcome that's going to come out from exposing young people and high schoolers to topics like that and components like that.
Yeah, because what we'll tell people today, and as cybersecurity folks that have been in it for 20 years or more, is, well, you should really work in an IT or software-related field before you get into security, because then it doesn't seem as overwhelming. And it's interesting. Right. I was listening to another podcast, and then we're talking about, as human beings, sometimes we just take on too much as a goal. And cybersecurity can seem like, oh, I want to get into cybersecurity. And then you go look at one or two things and talk to one or two people, and you're like, oh my God, there is so much for me to learn or know that I'm out. It's like, oh, I want to get into running, and my goal is to run a marathon. And everybody's like, yeah, you should go run a marathon. And you get those endorphins in your brain from just people telling you, good for you for wanting to run a marathon. And you get up and you run around the block, and you're like, wow, this stinks, I'm not running a marathon. You're giving up instantly, right? But it sounds like this course could be a fundamental building block to make that not seem as such an insurmountable task.
Exactly. And I'm sure everyone on the show today everyone is so familiar with the fact that there is and there will continue to be great shortage in the provision side of cybersecurity professionals, right? And so we know that we need more people to get into this field in different capacities, right? And so, like we were talking earlier about this, Paul, which is we all remember that one teacher who got us interested in that topic, that one topic that we liked, maybe pursued a career in. Sometimes it's related to liking the teacher or the way the teacher explained the topic to us and made us like it. And so when a course is carefully put together and crafted and there's a lot of thinking behind it, so put together by cybersecurity experts, by educational people, by people who are experts in the different age groups that the content is targeting, I think it's inevitable that it will ignite interest for further pursuit, as a career,
right,
as a hobby.
In that one teacher, Hanine, it doesn't have to be someone who's teaching you cybersecurity. Like my one teacher, have you read the book Tuesdays with Maury? Have you read that book before? Tuesdays with Maury? Mm-mm. It's a great book.
I haven't.
Yeah, you should definitely read it. It's about the relationship between a student and a teacher, and how that teacher was that one teacher for this person who kind of guided them in their career. And it wasn't even really related to the field. Like I have my Maury, who's the teacher, right? And he taught me, my environmental science teacher, but gave him the opportunity to work on computers, right? And it's how they reconnect later in life and things like that. So I don't think it has to be this most in-depth technical cybersecurity person that gets you into the field, because there's only so many people who are gonna be that. Is it always a doctor that gets people to come into healthcare? No, there's lots of different roles. You touched on this very briefly, that there's different roles in cybersecurity, much like healthcare, and it's not always the brain surgeon that's encouraging everyone to come into, and be in the medical field. There's lots of people that can guide the youth of today into the appropriate field for them.
Absolutely. And in this case, this is, for example, an online course, right? I mean, the student is gonna take it at their own phase, and they will decide if they like it, if they don't like it. So one option is for schools to say, we're gonna give you credit for it, or it's gonna be just an extra curriculum. So like you said, it doesn't have to be an expert necessarily, but I do think in general, again, going back to targeting the entire ecosystem, educational ecosystem and school ecosystem, that it would be very good to bring some sort of awareness, transfer of knowledge for all the participants in the system.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's, hopefully it can encourage more people, like my story about my oldest son, where by the time he had the opportunity to take a 2-day class in cybersecurity, and I was heartbroken, right? But I'm not going to push him into something he doesn't want to do. Like, he doesn't want to do cybersecurity, and that's totally fine. But he goes through day one of the cybersecurity camp that he had the opportunity to go through in middle school, and he was like, I don't want to go do day two. He's like, everyone else in the class was like, this was like their thing. He's like, this isn't my thing. Like, he's accepting the welding program, and I've taught him how to use every power tool like that we have at our disposal. And I tell you what, for a kid, like, I've never seen a kid more like responsible and skillful with a power tool. I'm like, dude, that's like your thing, right? Like, you should go do that. But I think part of his struggle, well, I mean, it's not his thing. We'll put that aside for a moment. Part of his struggle was like, I'm so unfamiliar with all of these terms that it's hard for me to even like know if I like it. And that's what I like about courses that like you've built, is that it can start building some of those building blocks earlier on, so that they can, when they have an opportunity to go to a camp, they're like, oh, I know what malware is because I took that course.
Right. Exactly. It's building that level of knowledge, that first block, that foundation. And there's also another aspect to this, which is, as you know, STEM and girls in STEM is a big thing, and there are a lot of discussions and policies being put together and so we're receiving a lot of interest from different entities that are talking with us about, the importance of delivering a course like this to different students, girls and boys, and also with the hope of stirring interest in and girls in topics like that and subjects like that. Now, for me personally, I don't differentiate. I think girls or boys or whatever the case might be, kids should have that knowledge and should be exposed to that, to the terminology, to the field, and what have you. But there's also that point that I wanted to talk about today, which is girls in STEMs and encouraging them to enroll and participate in that sector.
Yeah, and I think earlier than many of the programs that I've seen start, like I said, these clubs were available to middle school students. I would like to see some of the more engineering type fields like cybersecurity, software engineering be offered in grade school. And a part of that's, my experience. I was lucky. My parents signed me up for a programming course when I was 7, right? Like that.
Oh, wow.
I had someone at the DMV when
This explains a lot about you.
But she's like, the lady at the DMV, was asking me questions about like what I do and whatever. And like, I started programming when I was 7. And she was like, oh, they had that stuff back then? Because she was looking at my birth date on my license. I'm like, okay, like I get it. I'm old. Yes, they had computers back then that you could program. Yes, they did. But back then, of course, that wasn't the norm. But I think as far as advanced we've come with computers and making them accessible, and we still have a lot of work to do, I think starting those activities like programming, software engineering, and not necessarily, a lot of people have robotics, and I get it, and that's fun and that's cool and all, but like software engineering at the early stages, I think is super important, because you can go in so many different directions with that, cybersecurity being one of them.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree with you more, Paul.
So the next class I'd like you to see is for grade school students, to get them excited about programming, right? That would be, I think that's good for all of the engineering fields.
It's definitely in the working. So we're definitely working on that. And like I said, we're also coming up with ideas right now on making sure this is it's almost like an awareness creation effort, talking about and thinking about the entire system, about teachers, about parents, about
right. It can't just be folks like I remember. It was a great story. I was so excited when this happened that we were at some community event with all grade school kids, and there was this big chalkboard, And there was this one student, I knew the family, and their son was like doing math problems on the board. And I was like, did you ever do like computer programming? He's like, no, like, what's that? And I started on the chalkboard doing some computer programming and having him finish and teaching him conditional statements. He was like, oh, that's really cool. And I'm like, yeah, it'd be like really cool if we could teach that, teach that, not just the one nerd, happen to be standing there, notice you're writing math problems on the board doing it, but, integrate this into your schooling experience. I think would be awesome.
So,
Paul, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to make sure, like, I might have missed it. I got distracted by Discord for a little while, but did we get a link or anything to where these courses are, to any open source versions, to anything, any information about them?
I mean, I can definitely provide that for sure.
Please.
Yeah, I can.
Awesome.
I can provide that. Yeah.
Awesome. Lee hit his finger up there too.
So what I was going to ask is, as you're talking about new places and age groups to target, are you also having to develop a compendium edition or something to help get the teachers up to speed with what you want to teach the students so that they're enrolled and on your side, or is this just happening naturally?
No, that's exactly what we're thinking about, is to have something on the side to build that capacity. Now remember, this particular course, you don't necessarily need a teacher at the school, right? And we have a support system. We have a list of questions and answers that we've integrated into the course. And then there is 24-hour support, technical support, and content support if a student needs it. But in addition to that, so we're thinking really at a policy level, if you would, right? And so we are trying to put together. We're actually it's still in the ideation stage right now. But the idea is to put together courses that target teachers, and then courses that target parents, to also create that level of awareness.
Tyler, do you also have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to say it would be nice to also get some of the cybersecurity professionals that have done training, done teaching, have a way to contribute back if they're looking for things to contribute that may directly relate to them. Many of us are getting to the age where we have kids that are going to be going through some of these. So those opportunities to have really high caliber and high quality content developed by people in the industry that know what you need. Many of us are hiring managers, so we know exactly what we're trying to get in the industry. So I think that'd be a great point to have the community give back and have a good point and an easy system for us to contribute that information and content.
That's a great idea, actually. I mean, the course itself, like I said, it was put together by cybersecurity experts. And the target is to revise it and review it every 6 months with the intention of upgrading the information, updating it, what have you. And I really like the idea. I think that's a great idea. If we can open it up maybe to a panel, or just whoever wants to give any feedback or add anything. And of course, it has to go through a process, especially because this is an accredited course. And so, but nonetheless, just to make sure the entire community of cybersecurity experts is engaged, and I think that would be something that we're very open to. I want to go back to something that Paul just said when Paul, you were talking about how you were lucky at age 7 to get exposed to the field. And I just keep thinking, how many opportunities this world is missing by not providing different kids with opportunities to pursue, what skills and talent they have. So that kid you talked about, doing math on a board, and many others, millions others, if they're not exposed early on to the different fields that are out there, and that interest is ignited in them, how would they know? How would they know that there are all these opportunities out there where they would otherwise excel and contribute to the advancement of different fields? So this is really part of the thinking and something that we've had in our mind from day one when we put this course together.
Yeah, because many of the folks that I speak with talk about how their parents were involved in technology, and that's what got them into it. It's interesting. My parents weren't software engineers or didn't work in an engineering field. I think now that I think about it, what may have sparked it is my dad ran the family business, which was a jewelry business, and they had like one of the first computers for businesses. Like this is before everyone had a computer in their home, right? They had a mini computer or mainframe, and they had a person that would come in and program that for them. And I think my dad was like, I pay this person a lot of money, so this might be a good field for you to go in, right? And that might have been the push.
Right.
But I think we can work to make that more formalized. I did want to ask you, Hanine, speaking of that, how do we get apprenticeships not necessarily internships, but more of an apprenticeship model, which I really like. We see that in a lot of the trades. Are there efforts, or have you thought about how we build an apprenticeship program, especially as kids get in high school, for example?
So from our experience, apprenticeship and on the job training, exposure to how this looks like in real life, in a work setting or what have you, is so important. It's really the ultimate experience, the ultimate test. And so the way we're thinking about this right now, and this was actually one of our clients have encouraged us to think in those terms, is to, like I said, this is the first course, right? It covers the basics, the fundamentals of the industry, of the sector. And they're encouraging us, and we're taking steps toward that, to coming up with a version 2, version 3 that is more technical, etc. And then our thinking so far is for the coming versions of the course is to actually offer students opportunities to do some sort of an apprenticeship, to actually include information about schools or colleges or universities or learning tracks that are out there, and this could be even in the form of a summer internship or something similar. And so we're thinking about content that is beyond knowledge, and it actually can be used as guidance, as real-time guidance for students, where we connect them to a network of professionals and experts in the field.
Yeah. And I think that could be a great niche to fill especially for middle school students, right? My oldest being the shining example. And because now we're like, well, wait a minute, this is how this works? Because when they're in grade school in summer, many cities and towns across, the U.S., I'm sure across the world, have camps and programs because the parents work and you need to send your kids somewhere, right? So you've got Boy Scout camp, you've got the town camp where they can go and they make friends. It's a great social environment. When they get to, in our town, it's 13, I believe. So my son's going to be 14, right? He's too old to go to that camp, but he's not old enough to be a counselor. And so we're talking to other parents that have students like, wait a minute, what are you doing with your child during the summer? Because you're not going to sit home and play video games all day. Like I'm sure he might like that, but I'm like, no, like you need to go get a job. Well, who hires some? And kids vary that age range. Like the cutoff to work at McDonald's is 14. Some parents are like, my child is old enough and they can go work at McDonald's, and that's good experience, shows them responsibility. And then some students don't want to do that, or they're in the age where they're not ready for that for the summer. So like they're in kind of this limbo at that age. And wouldn't it be great even in the welding program, there might be like a 1 or 2 day or 1 week thing that my son's going for welding, but like I want him to have an apprenticeship for the summer in welding that is, even if it's 3 or 4 days a week for a few hours, to have that consistency in whatever they're interested in, whether it's cybersecurity or whether it's welding or whatever it is, right? I think that's a really good kind of sweet spot to hit on.
Right. And, for a while, we actually worked on many projects that encouraged, for example, coding camps. And it was targeted at different age groups, including middle schoolers and high schoolers and earlier grades. And so, there should be opportunities for cybersecurity camps, summer camps, winter camps, what have you. So that's definitely something that we're seriously thinking about, and would like to start seeing some sort of offerings starting soon, hopefully.
Yeah, I think at that age group, like a camp is a good thing, and then apprenticeships, like in high school, because I think the cutoff too for me is when the students start driving. Like once you can drive, now you can do an apprenticeship, right? Because your parents do. I mean, all of us that are parents that have kids that don't drive yet, we're the taxi and Uber drivers of the family, right? And we get that. And when you get to 3 kids, there's a lot of taxiing and Ubering you got to do for your kids. And in fact, the kind of informal program we have here at Security Weekly is I like the student to be able to drive. Like if you're interested in computers in general, whether it's cybersecurity or whatnot, if you can drive, like there's a program here, for you. So that's a good, I think, point for companies in areas to subscribe to a program where they can have an apprenticeship.
And I really think it's coming. I mean, I think awareness is there and it's building, and I think it's just a matter of time. And the more we all work on putting something together, even if it's just on experimental basis, at the beginning, and trying to find out, how the community, how schools, how young people are reacting to it, refining it further and further until it becomes part of many other offerings that are out there. And I really think that we will see more and more of these apprenticeship and or camps or opportunities coming up and materializing over the next few years.
Absolutely.
I was wondering, it sounds like you have a pretty awesome team back there. I'm wondering what it's been like to get everybody you need and all the skills, and where you're challenged in trying to find more resources to help you out, because this just sounds so phenomenal.
It definitely required a lot of resources. And like I said, we started before the pandemic. We started putting the pillars together before the pandemic. One of our partners is actually a cybersecurity expert. I think I can call him that. Mike, I hope I got your title right. And so he and others, whether in the academic world or people who actually have corporate positions or similar positions that are charged with protecting organizations, put their heads together. And the initial effort resulted in putting together the first round of content for the course, which was quite technical. And then we took that and put it in the hands of educators and like I said, those with expertise in the particular age group. So yes, it definitely was not a cheap endeavor. But we are hoping to recoup a lot of these expenses, with the sales of the course itself. And we were so pleasantly surprised by the reaction of the different school systems and even governments and educational entities to the course so far.
It sounds like it was amazing journey. Excuse me. It sounds wonderful.
It really has. And we've learned a lot. Like we've really learned a lot. To me, just the exposure to the world of cybersecurity by itself, and so from an educational point of view, I knew there was a gap from a purely educational point of view in that particular area. And so, and we continue. The idea is, yes, you can try to put in so many systems in place to protect the schools, to protect homes, etc., organizations. But I strongly believe that until and unless you create that level of awareness in the people who are using that technology, you would be facing a lot of challenges. And that's really what was the basis and the foundation of our thinking.
Hanine, have you thought about how we, to your point, does this really help, or is there other things that we can do to help improve the cybersecurity posture of the school systems themselves, right? Many of them come under attack from ransomware. Many of them are underfunded and understaffed, especially in the IT and especially the security aspects of that. It sounds like organically this program might help that if your users are going, hey, wait a minute, I just learned in this course that like we should be changing our passwords and having two-factor authentication, and my school district doesn't offer that. In the school district right today, most are going to go, we don't have the funding or the resources or the knowledge for that. Like, we also need to fix that problem too, right?
Absolutely. I do think, like I said, I think just the accumulation of knowledge and the exposure to the basics of the topic, I think in and by itself is going to play into the protection of schools and later on organizations and other entities and colleges. And yes, there is a funding issue, of course, that's facing school districts, but this is really, I think, one of the most economic ways to combat the problem, right? The technical side, of course, is necessary and it's needed, but it probably would be much more costly than educating our kids and other players in the school system.
Yeah, they certainly have their work cut out for them as well. Having worked for a university, right, securing that educational environment is certainly challenging.
Right.
And it helps too that if they go through this training, by the time they get to college, they expect certain things and know how to protect them in those different environments, I think is also really important too.
Absolutely. And I think also, like, if I was an HR director and I'm looking at resumes, it probably would catch my eye if I see somebody who had finished successfully a course like this, right? And so I would know that that person is coming in with enough knowledge, to protect the organization that they are joining. And the same applies for colleges as well, and that's also something that we are working on right now, which is it's a different group of age-wise and of recipients, but college students also are on our horizon as recipients of a similar course, but more targeted at college-age students.
Right, and not necessarily to work in cybersecurity, but when you're hiring, you want to hire folks that have at least some knowledge and awareness of these issues.
Exactly. That's exactly my point. Exactly. So that they're coming in with enough knowledge to protect the organizations they are joining, which is a great, it's a great asset and an added advantage to that candidate.
If folks are listening and they want to help, what are some ways in which they can help, whether it be evangelizing or helping directly, or their specific people or roles or activities that you're interested in getting some help in?
First of all, we on our website, we have they can send emails, they can send ideas, they can send suggestions. and we definitely would welcome that at any point. We would like to get feedback from as many people as possible. That would be so helpful for us to further refine the product and make sure that we've covered everything. And we're always talking. We're going to conferences. We're talking with different people. We are so eager to get suggestions from everyone, including parents, including cybersecurity experts, including school systems, to further, whether for this particular course or for other ideas, whatever we can do to kind of achieve those goals that we have in mind.
And not just here in the U.S., because I've spoken to other people, which don't go away after the interview, because I got a couple of people that I want to see if you're interested in getting introduced to that have come to mind during this interview. But this is not just a strictly U.S.-based thing, right? This is your other countries you want to see adopt this training as well.
Absolutely. So, of course, I would like to see it in the U.S. And helping as many schools and students as possible. But we're really also targeting different countries and different school systems around the world.
Fantastic. More questions for Hanine? I have none. I think
Honestly,
that brings us...
It's been great. I think links and lists of how to help, links on where to go to offer that help up, to volunteer, and any links to content and curricula that can be used and downloaded and such would be fantastic. Also, Hanine, are you familiar with Rachel Offline?
I'm sorry?
Rachel Offline.
No.
It's an initiative that I had a tiny little piece in helping with Hackers for Charity. It has an entire library and courses and such on a single unit. It's basically designed to be dropped into places that have no internet and very little power. So it's an access point, a battery. Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you just reminded me of the hand crank Linux laptop. What was that called?
The OLPC, and then it wasn't hand cranked though.
The OLPC. Did it have were toying with a model that was like a hand crank battery? Yeah, these were like Linux-based laptops that you could distribute to places that didn't have computing. OLPC, yeah. It reminded me of that, Josh.
Yeah, but the Rachel Offline still sold. It's it has all of Khan Academy on it. It has like 100 different databases on it, and it's an access point, a battery, and a hard drive basically in one unit. And so you can use a cheap tablet and access it. Creates its own ad hoc access point.
That's amazing. That's amazing. No, thank you so much. I'll definitely check it out and let the team know about it.
Please. I forget the website, but if you just Google Rachel Offline, you should come up with it right away.
Yeah, I'm actually doing that right now while I'm talking to you.
So please send us some links, send us some ways to get in touch, send us some ways. How do we volunteer? Where do we go? How can we see it? That kind of thing. We'd love to help.
We'll do that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I mean, I really need input from people like you and others, to make sure that we are achieving our objectives here. And spreading the word and making sure that people are aware of the different ways they can provide opportunities to students and young people.
Hanine, we ask all of our guests to come on the show, even though I forgot to ask Mark earlier, and I'll have to ask him in the next segment. 5 questions. Would you like to play 5 questions with Security Weekly? There's no right or wrong answer, and they're not technical questions either. So if you're ready.
You want me to ask you those questions?
No, I'm going to ask you those questions.
Oh, okay. Okay.
All right. There's no right or wrong answer.
And that means Mark's going to get we're going to have some chances.
That's right. Mark has to hear the questions now.
So he's got a chance to think about it.
Truth or dare?
No, it's just, all right.
Just truth.
You'll see. So, Hanine, 3 words to describe yourself.
Stubborn, ambitious, dreamer.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
Words.
Ooh. If you were to write a book about yourself, what would the title be?
A very unusual life.
What is your favorite hacker movie?
That's a very tricky question.
Oh, you're gonna have some homework now. So we got like war games,
I do.
sneakers.
I don't watch a lot of movies. Let me tell you that.
All right, we'll send you a list and we'll check back in. It's important it'll help you understand our hacker culture, well, at least in a fictitious manner. Hanine, choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, or otherwise.
Oh, Lee's siloning again.
So that was
alive, dead, fictional or otherwise.
Yeah, 2 celebrities to be your parents. They can be people from history. They can be fictitious characters.
Sure. Meryl Streep and Jack Nicholson.
Oh, there you go. Hanine, thank you so much for appearing on Paul Security Weekly.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun. Thank you.
And everyone stay tuned. The security news is coming up next.